Hello, today we're going to talk about detachment or vairaghya. My name is Douglas Johnson and I am a yoga teacher at the advanced 500-hour level. Before I get into today's talk, I do want to thank my patrons on Patreon who make these talks possible without a paywall. And if you're interested in joining that community, please check out the links below and at the beginning and end of the video. Also, if you're on YouTube, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting, as that also helps the channel out. So, non-attachment, detachment, vairaghya. It's a Sanskrit word. And it's taken from the Yoga Sutras. And this is a word that can have a lot of meaning to it. And I don't want the talk to be too long. So we're just going to look at two aspects that I think are most relevant to the modern yoga practitioner and meditator. So the first aspect is, how does this apply, say, in a yoga class where we're doing postures? Well, I think it shows up for us in the discomfort that we might feel. Unfortunately for us, there's a lot of things that we can do that don't feel great in the moment, but are actually really great for our health. So say chair pose or holding one of the lunges like the warriors. If we hold these for any length of time, we are likely to get uncomfortable very quickly. And this is how traditional yoga is. Maybe you take a super fast vinyasa class. That's a new thing. And I'm not convinced it actually is in the best interest of the yoga practitioner who's really interested in yoga, in doing this kind of a class where it's sort of like a cardio style workout. That didn't really exist in traditional yoga. Most yoga styles, if not all of them, traditionally would have at least some holding of postures. So you could actually be aware of what was going on inside of you. So detachment, on its most superficial level, is sort of like detaching from sense objects and things outside, right? So turning our attention inward. But once we've done this, if we're holding like a yoga posture and we start to get uncomfortable, or even in meditation, then detaching from that impulse that will come up, right? Again, let's say we're holding a chair pose, and after a little while, we start to feel like we have the thought, I want to stop this. This is uncomfortable. We feel like a burning in our legs, something like that. We feel a lot of discomfort. Well, do we act on that, or do we detach from that, right? So in other words, when we're identified with our thoughts and our feelings, when we're constantly listening to the noise in our head, then the minute we're like, oh, I want to stop this, we stop. We don't even consider that there's like another option, or that may not be our best course of option. With some yoga practice and introspection, mindfulness work, we can begin to see that the first thought that we have, or any thoughts that we have, they may actually not be worth listening to. They may not actually be in our best interest. And many of the thoughts that we have aren't even really our thoughts. These can be implanted from our parents, from our education, from the society at large. And these thoughts will still pop up. It doesn't mean that we should listen to them. So this is another level of detachment. I'm feeling something, maybe I don't like it, and I am detaching from the impulse that sort of would drive me to try and change or fix the situation. And so we find this in my classes in what we call a rebound a lot of times in yin, where we come out of the yin posture and we're encouraged to just feel what's there without trying to fix it or change it or do something about it. We're encouraged to just feel, right? Open yourself up to just feeling what's there. And for many people, this is very counterintuitive and difficult because we are so used to just reacting to every single impulse that arises. So it can take quite a bit of awareness because, again, if we don't have any separation between our thoughts and impulses and how we behave and act, then we actually think that's us. And this is a big part of the yogic journey, is realizing just because I have a thought, it doesn't mean it's my thought, and it doesn't mean that that's what I believe or think. And this is a very interesting part of the journey and a very, you could say, important turning point for many people when they realize, like, oh, I have thoughts that I, in a sense, don't agree with. I have thoughts that aren't serving me or serving those in my life. I have impulses that I should actually resist, right? Because usually before we do this work, we just assume if I have a desire, I should fulfill that desire. If I have a thought, that's what I believe. And this changes with yoga and meditation, with mindfulness, with introspection. So this is one way it shows up in yoga, right? I see it as a professional yoga teacher all the time. There are those in class that are just sort of doing their own thing. And I don't want to demonize this or say that it's always wrong or bad. There could be many reasons for this. But one of the possible reasons, is this person has not developed detachment yet. That they are still sort of insisting on doing it their way. And their idea is, well, you know, because I want to do this, because this feels right for me, then that's what I should do. And I would say this goes against really the discipline and the practice and the path of yoga. We come to yoga because we want to change or transform on some level. We want something we don't yet have. Otherwise, why would we do it? So the fact that yoga is transformative, we have to allow it to do its job. And when we just sort of randomly omit parts of the practice that we don't particularly like or we don't think feels very good, we might be leaving out the most transformative and important parts of the practice. And if you say, well, I know that they're not important or I know they're not transformative, well, then why are you taking a class? In a very real sense, you're taking a class because, again, you're wanting something you don't have. Otherwise, we'd just be insane, right? For doing things that are going to lead to results that we don't want or we're not seeking. So the best approach, in my opinion, is try and do what is being offered by the class or teacher to the very best of your ability, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's difficult. Now, if you think there is a safety issue, then I would speak with your teacher. A good teacher will be open to exploring your options and hopefully helping you find a safe way to do whatever it is that you're being asked to do, where you get most of or all of the benefits. If this is not the nature of the relationship you have with your teacher, then my recommendation would be find a teacher where you can have that kind of relationship with them, because I think this is paramount. I think this is extremely important to practicing yoga, that you are able to do this. Yoga traditionally was taught one-on-one or in small groups. It was not taught in a classroom style setting. While the classroom style setting has its advantages, one of the disadvantages is the advice you get is generic. It's generalized. It works for most people most of the time, but there will always be instances where you're going to find that your individual situation may differ from the general population or the general public, and your individual situation should not go on being ignored. So don't be afraid of opening up communication with your teacher or teachers, and honestly, how they handle or deal with it will tell you a lot about sort of whether or not you will be able to use this teacher as a resource on your path, or maybe how long. Some yoga teachers are really good at the sort of fitness aspect of things, and yet they have no real interest or knowledge of the deeper parts of yoga. And this isn't really meant to put anybody down. It's just factual. Yoga has now become mostly known as a way of sort of staying fit, but that's not really what yoga is about. It's not really part of a fitness craze or just staying in shape or having a lean, toned body. Can yoga do that for you? Sure, but it's not limited to that. So, in my opinion, if that's really all someone's interest is, then they're really not a yoga teacher. They're really more of a fitness instructor, and that's fine. Or a postural teacher. They teach poses, working out, exercise, fitness. They're not really interested in the inner yoga, which ultimately is what yoga is about, at least traditionally. That's what the word really was pointing us to. So let's talk about that aspect now, the more inner aspect of vairaghya. So again, we sort of have the detaching our attention from outside and moving it inward. And then as we move inward, detaching from these impulses that come up to do something or change something. And then the even deeper aspect is, as we walk on the spiritual path, we can begin to experience very blissful states and begin to experience different perspectives and ways of experiencing. And we can get attached to those as well. So vairaghya, in a sense, the meaning starts to not really change, but it refines to go from being attached to certain experiences in the world and being attached to our inner impulses to now really being attached to, say, a meditative state or a state of peace or bliss. And this is a more nuanced point because, in a sense, some of these states are good signifiers that we're on the right path. So it's a good sign, if I'm feeling a lot of peace, if I'm feeling calm and I'm feeling connected. These are things that we covet, and they can, again, really say to us that, we're on the right path. However, ultimately, yoga and non-duality, the spiritual path that I teach and share with others, is really about detaching from everything. And that includes any kind of state. So the ultimate teaching is that we are pure awareness. This is our true nature. And awareness has a capacity for anything or any state or any perspective to arise. This is like its superpower. It is not attached to any of these things, and yet it holds all of them. This is why you may often hear teachers talk about loving awareness, because in a very real sense, awareness, because of its detached nature, it loves everything. It's not attached to just being peaceful. It's not attached to just being blissful or present or loving. In a very real sense, when we really understand the deepest nature of what we are, we realize that it is all of these things. It holds all of these things, and it is not attached to any of them. And so you go through this interesting journey of detaching and finding more peaceful and blissful states, and then eventually you could say letting go of these or detaching from these as well, until you know yourself as pure loving awareness, that you are open to all states. You are free of attachment to all states. And I always like to point out that spiritual practices cannot really be measured in terms of future or past. And this is something I find is a source of confusion for many people, not just people on the path, but also teachers, who we could argue are also on the path to a certain degree, until you realize there's no path. But let's just say there's some teachers who basically their claim to being a teacher is that they had some kind of experience. And this might be well publicized. They might talk a lot about their enlightenment experience or states that they've achieved in meditation or things that they've seen or places that they've gone to in their meditative states. Well, that's all fine and good, but the question in spirituality is always, what's happening right now? Okay, what is happening right now? And the other thing is, again, future orientation about, I'm going to meditate tonight and experience this or that, or I'm going to revisit this state or that. But while meditative states are great, the truth of spirituality is present always. And so we have to, in a sense, be able to realize the truth of these teachings in any given moment. And I would argue that this is both easier than it sounds and harder than it sounds. It's kind of hidden in plain sight. It's right there that what we truly are is this awareness, that nothing exists without awareness. Everything exists within awareness. And awareness is the thing that predates anything else showing up. How can you have language if you don't have any awareness of language, right? How can you have an object if there is no awareness of the object? How will we know the object is there? How can you have a universe if there's no awareness of the universe to say, hey, there's an awareness, or sorry, there's a universe to be aware of? Awareness always has to precede existence. And I understand this might be a little bit beyond your pay grade right now. That's okay. This is something that we explore in my teachings and in other non-dual teachings. But this is the realization that we're trying to get to. And one way you can get to it, if you're not there yet, is to do direct pointing with a teacher like me or another teacher. And this can be like one session or it can be several sessions, but most people who are, say, listening to a talk like this and understanding it to some degree, you're probably ready. I'm not going to say that direct pointing works for everybody, because that simply isn't true. But very often the people interested in direct pointing are the people that can benefit from direct pointing from a teacher. And so this gives us the, you could say, deeper aspect of vairaghya, non-attachment. right? That there is this loving space of awareness, and that's actually what we are. And this loving space of awareness in reality has a capacity, and you could even say a desire, to just let everything be as it is. This is why in some spiritual traditions there's a lot of emphasis on letting go of the ideas of good and bad and right and wrong. It's not to say that as a human being there isn't good or bad or right or wrong from our relative perspective, but the perspective we are trying to realize is one that isn't really relative. It's all perspectives. It is everything and all at once. And so from that perspective, it really doesn't favor one outcome over another. It sort of is just in love with everything, because everything is ultimately its own self. And again, this is a more subtle aspect that may not be evident, even for people who've had some realization. So I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, leave them in the comment below. If you'd like more content like this, I've started really putting a lot more on my Patreon page, more resources over there. I've also created several other channels. One you might enjoy is the Institute, where I've started putting my yin related content. So reach out at any time, and until next time, namaste and have a beautiful, beautiful day.